everyone, my name is Ariana and welcome back to a brand new video. Today's video is actually very exciting for me. I'm going to be showing you guys the books that I've read so far in 2022 plus my current TBR list. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started with this video. So in all honesty, it had been a while since I had gotten back into the habit of reading books. I basically stopped once I finished high school, and it wasn't until this year that I decided to just pick up a book, which was this one that I'm going to be showing you all. But I picked up this book, and after I read this one, I knew that I wanted to keep reading. The last time that I remember reading a book in general was when I was in high school, and it was for the summer reading projects that we had to do throughout my years in high school. I wouldn't really pick up books for reading. I would just read it if I had to, but I wasn't like actively seeking to read a book. But I actually went ahead and started reading with this book that's right here. It's called Almost Adulting by Arden Rose. This book is actually about all you need to know to get your life together, sort of. I picked it up just because of the cover, and I actually really did like this book. I actually gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and it gives you a lot of advice as to like relationships, how to meet friends, make sure you eat enough, focus on your health, different things that you can do. It just gives you a lot of recommendations, and I actually felt like she was talking to me like in a big sister way, and I would 100% read it again. So this was the first book that I read in January, and like I said, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read wasn't actually until February, and it was actually this book called In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. I want to say that's how you pronounce her name, but this is the cover art, and the cover art is honestly the reason that I got this book. I was just running in and out of Target, and I thought, you know what, let me take a quick look at the books real quick. Let me see if maybe I'll find one that I might like. The chapters in here are honestly really short, so it makes it so much easier to read and so much easier to grasp the storyline because of it. I ended up finishing this book in a day, and let me just tell you, this book really will make you tear up a little bit. I highly recommend this book if you're trying to get back into reading, just because of how easy it is to read. This story is just incredible, and I will forever be grateful that this is the book that got me back into reading. The next book that I read was actually a poem book, and it was very highly recommended by a lot of my friends, and it's called Milk and Honey. I cannot pronounce her name, so please, I don't know. I finished it in one sitting. It is a quick read, and I give this book a 5 out of 5 stars. The way that it's written, it's incredible. It's such a beautiful book. The writing is A1. It hooks you from the beginning, and you're able to finish it in literally one sitting. Personally, for me, it lived up to the hype, but it honestly will make you cry a little bit, especially if you resonate with what the author is saying. The next book that I read in February was Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. This book is incredible. It is a little bit long, as you can see. There are around 400 something pages. Yeah, 396 pages. Overall, it has a really good storyline. She ends up doing a double POV to focus on the two main characters, which are Jordan and Pike, and the more and more that the story goes on, the more and more you want to know what happens with the characters, and you want to know what each of them are thinking. The story is incredible, like I said, and Penelope really makes sure that you feel for the characters. Originally, I had given this book a 5 out of 5 stars, but later on I changed it to a 4.5. The only reason that I lowered it a little bit was because it was really long, and I'm not really into super long books. The majority of the books that I've been reading, they're between 250 to 300, but this one was definitely one of the bigger books that I've read. But besides that, I absolutely love the story, and this book will always hold a special place in my heart. So the next book that I read was actually in March, and it was Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. This was my first Colleen Hoover book, and let me tell you, she lives up to the hype. She lives up to the hype. This book is just wow. Like, wow, I absolutely love Colleen Hoover. This book is actually what got me into reading her books. I actually ended up finishing this in 3 days. The chapters are really short, so it makes it easier for you to read. The story itself is just... it focuses on a pilot and an RN in San Francisco, and I'm not gonna say much of it, but let's just say, wow. And one thing I really love about books is when the story itself explains why they picked the cover art, and in this story you'll find out why they picked this cover art, and I think that was just like chef's kiss. I think that was perfection. But this book, easily 5 out of 5 stars. Colleen Hoover, I love you. The next book that I read in March is actually another poem book, and it is Light Filters in Poems. This book, I loved it, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of illustrations in here, and it's a hardcover book. It is probably the only hardcover book that I have in all my books. This book is honestly really good, but I did read it after Milk and Honey, and Milk and Honey kind of did set the bar a little bit too high. I did give it a 3 out of 5 stars, but besides that, the poems that are in here are really heartfelt. Right off the bat, it is very intense. Unlike Milk and Honey, that one kind of grasps you from the beginning and it kind of lets your emotions just kind of fall into place. With this one, it was just kind of intense right off the bat, and that was something that I wasn't really prepared for, if I'm being honest. I really did have to take a break right when starting it because of how intense it started off with, but it is really raw and really human, and Caroline does an amazing job as a poet. And it really does take a lot from you to be very, very vulnerable, especially as a poet. So crazy to me to think about an 18-year-old writing this book. In April, I did read 2 books, and those 2 books are actually this one and this one. I had to read another Colleen Hoover book after reading Ugly Love. Like, I just had to. But the book that I read before that was Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. Christina Lauren are actually 2 authors that co-write together. So they created this masterpiece called Love in Other Words. This book is actually in the main character's point of view. It does alternate between the past and the present. It does focus on 2 main characters who get separated over a decade without having any sort of communication with each other, and all of a sudden they are brought back together kind of by fate. Overall, it is a really good book. I give this a 5 out of 5 stars. The storyline is incredible, and the past and the present going back and forth between the chapters is really, really good. I absolutely love the story, and I cannot wait to read it again, if I'm being honest. The next Colleen Hoover book that I read is November 9th, and if I had to pick between reading Ugly Love and November 9th first, I would 100% read Ugly Love first, just because it kind of ties into what happens in November 9th in a way. Of course, if you read November 9th first and then Ugly Love, it'll be okay, but it will just make a lot more sense in the story if you read Ugly Love first and then November 9th. This book is 100% my favorite book of all time. It kind of solves some puzzles that your brain is left there thinking without even knowing that it's there. Once I read this book, I knew that she was my favorite author, hands down. Both of the Colleen Hoover books that I've read, they both have been 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm going to remember this book and the storyline forever. Like, there is no way that I'm not going to be able to remember it just because of how much I loved it. This follows the 2 main characters, Fallon and Ben, and their story is just, I don't want to say too much, but pretty much they only see each other once a year on the same day, which is November 9th. They do that for a couple of years. What's crazy about this book is that they have no sort of communication throughout the other 364 days out of the year. That's just insane to me, how they were able to kind of pull this off. But I mean, it is a story. But I mean, still, you know what I mean? Like I said, I absolutely love this book with my whole heart, and it's always gonna hold a very, very special place in my heart. There were a lot of twists and turns in this book, if I'm being honest, but the storyline was still intact and everything flowed very, very nicely, and that is something that I really liked. But that's all that I'm gonna say in this book. If you want to know why I love it so much, you should go ahead and read it, because this, like I said, is my favorite book of all time. So that is November 9th by Colleen Hoover, and I'm really gonna start to wrap things up a little bit because the sun is setting and the light is going away, but I honestly really like this lighting. So I took a break from reading in May and June because I was working a lot and I was trying to start YouTube. So there was a lot of things that I kind of had to figure out, and I just really didn't have time to read until the past month, and I started reading again. And after my break, I've only read 2 more books, which is Beach Read by Emily Henry, which is the first book that I've read of hers, and The Sun and Her Flowers by my favorite poet, which I cannot pronounce her name yet. These are the only 2 other books that I've read after my break. I read this one in July and this one last week. This book, I feel like y'all are gonna hate me, but I actually give this book a 2 out of 5 stars. I think I could maybe do a 3. Honestly, 3 out of 5 stars. I think 3 out of 5 stars. But this book was on the longer side. It has 364 pages. In all fairness, this is the first book that I picked up in 2 months. So obviously I wasn't gonna be able to finish it within a couple of days. It actually ended up taking me 2 weeks just because of how busy I was, and I just couldn't really grasp the story. So I think that has a lot to deal with why I only gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Regardless, regardless, the storyline was honestly really good. I will say that, but it did take me forever to read. Part of it could be because I was, like I said, really busy. I just wouldn't want to read it again just because of how long it felt. Even though I did have a lot going on, I feel like I could have continued reading it if I felt grasped onto the story from the beginning, and that's something that I really didn't get. It took me a while before I actually knew what the story was getting at. There was a lot of excess information that just had nothing to do with what the actual book was about, and that was a little bit different than the other books. Like all the other books, it had a storyline and it continued, and everything was leading up to the next and the next and the next and the next. This one, things were leading up, but then, and I don't know. Like I said, I liked it, but I wouldn't want to read it again just because of that reason. It does focus on the two main characters, January and Gus. I love how the storyline itself is from neighbors to lovers. That's the trope, right? That's how you say it, the trope? I don't know. College acquaintances to neighbors to lovers sort of situation, but I felt like there was excess information that could have been left out, and probably the last third of the book, that's kind of when things started speeding up. Overall, it wasn't a bad book. It just isn't the type of book that I prefer to read. Also, I'm so sorry, like the sun is literally going down right now. I just have one more book, and it is this one, The Sun and Her Flowers. This book is exactly what I had been needing to get back into reading. I finished it in one sitting. Like I said, it's my favorite author, so it's right up there with Milk and Honey. She is very heartful in everything that she writes, and she puts her heart and her soul into it, so that is something that I really do love. This book I really recommend to anyone going through a tough time, because it really does make you feel like you're not alone in the certain situation that you might be going through. I don't know, it just really makes you emotional reading this book, and that is why, like I said, I will 100% be reading this book again. Okay, so these are the books that I've read so far in 2022. Let me go ahead and show you all the books that I have on my current TBR list. So of course, starting off with Colleen Hoover, I have 2 of her books on my TBR list, which are Reminders of Him and It Ends With Us. I've had this book since February, but I've just been putting off reading this book because everyone says that it's the best book of all time. Colleen Hoover books. I'm just not mentally ready to read this book. So I've been putting off reading this book for as long as possible, but I just want to read it already. But yeah, these are the 2 Colleen Hoover books that I have on my current TBR list. And then I also have The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood, which is this one, and then The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas, which is this one. So these 2 books I've been wanting to read forever, but the only thing that is getting me a little bit, I don't know, is because they are a little bit on the thicker side. That shouldn't stop me from reading a book. And then I also have Just Haven't Met You Yet by Sophie Cousins, which is this one. If you saw one of my haul videos, I showed y'all that I had gotten Just Haven't Met You Yet and Reminders of Him. Well, it's been a couple months and I've yet to read these 2, unfortunately. So yeah, these are the current books that I have on my current TBR list. I'm not sure which one I should read next, so comment down below which book you think I should read next from these. I don't know, should I just read It Ends With Us, or should I read Reminders of Him, Just Haven't Met You Yet, Love Hypothesis, Spanish Love Deception? I don't know, y'all tell me because I have no idea which one to read next. These are the book options. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and start wrapping it up, but yeah, the sun is already going down and I can barely see it anymore, and I feel like y'all can barely see me, so I'm just gonna go ahead and end this video right here. But thank you guys for watching my book video. I will probably make another one of these at the end of 2022 once I finish these books and maybe a couple of more, but I really do appreciate y'all watching. Comment down below what type of videos you would like to see me do in the future, but for right now, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.